Greetings to the participants of the Scientific and Practical Conference, Issues of Teaching Children and Youth with Disabilities. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak. My name is Adam Okельford, and I'm a professor of music at the University of Roehampton in London. My special interest is in how children develop musically, particularly children who have special abilities and special needs. So my work goes right across the spectrum of neurodiversity. I work with children who are still learning to speak, who are still learning to move, who are still learning to think for themselves, right up to children who have a professional ability to make music. My philosophy is that all children are musical and that all children deserve the very best music education. All children can benefit from learning music. For some, that might mean using music as a natural language in place of words. For some children on the autism spectrum, it may provide a way of reaching out into the world of other people. And for others, they may be able to play at a professional level. Having disabilities doesn't affect the musical abilities of children. About 20 years ago, with colleagues in London, I set up the Sounds of Intent project. Sounds of Intent shows how all children develop musically. So I work with children right across the spectrum of neurodiversity. That includes children on the autism spectrum and children who are blind and children who are deaf. And the most amazing thing, particularly with children on the autism spectrum, is that exceptional musical abilities can develop quite on their own. So the musical brain in all of us develops most quickly when we're babies. And most children, by the time they're 5 years old and go to full-time education, most of their musical learning has already happened, just in the same way that most of their language learning has already happened. Now, for some children on the autism spectrum, something quite different happens. They develop this ability called absolute pitch. So for most of us, if we hear a piece of music, we have a general sense of how it goes. For a child with absolute pitch on the autism spectrum, they have a specific memory. They remember every single note of every single instrument. And they discover by themselves that they can copy what's in their head by playing notes on a keyboard. And for them, must be a magical moment. For many children who are autistic, language and words are quite confusing, particularly when they're little. And yet here is another natural language that humans make called music, that they can not only understand, because the brain is seeking patterns in all these sounds, they can also recreate it. They can produce it for themselves, and they can communicate with other people. They can copy what other people do. Other people can copy them. And so within music, it satisfies all their needs for a human relationship. And usually they are very, very motivated because they realize they can control their environment by playing music and relate to other people. They keep doing it. They become obsessed very often with reproducing musical sounds and playing pieces. And so some autistic children by the age of 4 or 5 are already quite competent musicians, which is extraordinary. Often without any tuition whatsoever, they teach themselves. The challenge then for teachers, which is what I've spent most of my life doing, is to take this natural ability and this love of music and to try to come alongside a child to form a relationship through the music so we can help move them forward. Because music's nice when it's nice, music's nice anyway when people are playing on their own, but the real power of music comes through its ability to help people relate to one another. And very often for non-verbal autistic children, music can be the first medium that enables a relationship to happen. And that's the most magical thing about music. In years gone by, people used to think that music was just in a small part of the brain. Nowadays, through scanning, when people go into a scanner and listen to music, lots of the brain lights up. It's a whole brain activity. And that includes some of the very most primitive parts of the brain. The emotional centers in particular are very powerfully triggered by music. Now, what this means, it means two things. First of all, that for people with brain damage or who, for example, whose language centers aren't working, it means that the musical centers, which tend to be deeper in the brain, can be undamaged and can still function. But more than that, language and music in the brain are closely connected. They have some shared resources. Now, for children whose language path is damaged or absent, so they can't speak, perhaps, it may be the case that they can access music, access language through the musical part of the brain. So the musical channel is intact and working well. And the musical center is connected to the language center, the word center. And so the musical part can pull the words out. And so a child is able to use words in the context of music. Music teachers very often approach teaching with their own system. You know, they have a theory of how to teach, and they tend to use the same approach with all children. Now, with most children, that doesn't matter because children are actually very flexible and very pliant. You know, they will accommodate different teaching styles. Children with special needs, including autism, are often autodidactic. So they have taught themselves and they want to learn in a specific way. And if you try to impose a predetermined way of teaching, a pedagogy that you try to impose on the child, there'll be a friction, there'll be a dissonance, and it won't work. The child will put a barrier up and you won't have a relationship and you can't work together. So I think the art of teaching children on the autism spectrum and with other special needs is, first of all, to observe what they do, to enter into their world, maybe imitating what they do, for example, and then watch them. So once they realize that they can control you, because if they play something and you copy it, you are giving them control of the dialogue. And once they realize that they can be in control of a situation, because autistic children are very rarely in control of life, very often they can't communicate through words. And yet here's a situation in which they can control the narrative. And then gradually through play, you can start introducing ideas. And if they trust you, they will then start to imitate you. And so you can set up a relationship purely through sound. You know, with lots of young autistic children, if you analyze the language they hear, it's all about stop, don't do that. No, I said no. Whereas, and so language is a very negative experience for them. Whereas music never tells you off. It never tells you what to do. Music is the language of play. And children learn through play. And so you have to enter into the mind of the child and the imagination of the child and have fun. Once you've got the child's attention and once you've got the relationship of trust, you can then start being more formal. But many autistic children wouldn't accept the imposition of a system that you want. You have to be child-centered above all. Very good. A bit more. That's good. Great. A bit more. Oh. Last bit. Look, give me the thing. Give me the thing. Right. Pit, pit, pit. Yeah. Look. Ready? There was a study in England of music teachers and by the government, and they found that in schools, most music lessons were about 80 to 90% teacher talking. And yet all the children wanted to do was make music. And we all have a tendency to talk far too much anyway. So my tip for working with autistic children is not to say anything, just make music, just have fun. So if when the child comes into the room you're playing or singing or whatever, they will probably watch what you're doing, and then they might want to come and join in. They might start doing something of their own. But actually, very often you can have a lesson for half an hour or an hour or 2 hours, 3 hours without any words at all. It's all about music. I remember when I started teaching Fedor, I said, well, I probably won't be able to teach him because I don't speak Russian. And you said, well, that's all right. He doesn't speak Russian either. He speaks music. And of course, we can have a wonderful relationship because we both speak a language that transcends countries and cultural boundaries. We both speak the language of music. And you can have a really advanced relationship with someone without any words being spoken. So my one thing I say to all student teachers is shut up. Shut up, listen to the child. And when you do make a sound, make musical sounds, not words. If you have to explain it to the child, you've lost the point. So yes, and a good way of introducing language is through song, because the language contained within a song is connected to musical notes. And that can be easier for children to process than spoken language. There's several reasons why that's the case. One, that music triggers other parts of the brain into action, which can then help the language processing part. Second, songs tend to be very repetitive, and that's what the brain that finds language confusing needs. It needs lots of repetition. And third, when you sing a song, the words are always the same. When we talk, the words are always different, which is the last thing a brain that's confused with language needs. It needs absolute consistency, and songs provide that consistency. And fourth, it provides a safe structure in which to have a dialogue. If you sing a song and a line of a song and the child copies it and you take turns, it's a safe structure in which to have a dialogue. I think there are a number of myths about children on the autism spectrum. One is that they're not creative. The children I work with are all intensely creative. They just usually lack the medium to be creative in. And music provides a medium for them to explore, to experiment, to try things out. Because music is so structured, ironically, that enables them to be free, because music is like a system of complicated rules, and children with autism love to grasp those rules, and then they can play with the rules and they can break the rules. And that's a source of creativity. It's a source of fun. It's a source of humor, because they can deliberately not only copy what you do, but change what you do, twist it to have a different meaning. The other myth about autistic children is that they don't feel emotions in the same way that neurotypical people do. My experience is that they feel emotions more deeply, if anything. It's just that the way they express those emotions might be different, unusual, and people don't read what the children are thinking. And yet in music, they often play with intense expressivity, because I think in the same way that a chord affects us and causes us to have an emotional reaction, in many of the children I work with, a chord or a sequence can have an even more intense emotional reaction. I've seen autistic children, I just play a chord of G7 and they might cry, not because they're sad, but because it's so overwhelmingly beautiful to them. And I think teachers need to look for the more subtle signs in autistic children that they may be affected emotionally by the music they hear. It may be a more powerful experience. I think as we get older, it's not only our hair that goes grey, but also our emotional palette gets more grey, it gets more bland. And sometimes we look at very young children and the way they react to everything, the sounds, the sights of the world is very vibrant and in colour. And autistic children, I think, keep that vibrant perception later into childhood. So they still rejoice in the sheer qualities of sounds of things and the sheer colours of things and the smells and the scents. Life is a vivid experience for them, sometimes overwhelming, but through music, which offers structure and safety, they can experience those powerful reactions to sound in a safe space that they can control. And so I think they're deeply affected by music, which is a fantastic thing. The British education system it's hard for me to understand. So how to explain it to anyone else is almost impossible. The trouble is, as in many countries, education has become a political football. And the place of art and music goes up and down according to the government of the day. Everyone, if you ask them, everybody, we've done surveys of head teachers in schools, and they all think that music is really important in the curriculum. And for children with special needs, it's vital. And yet, the government won't put sufficient resources into music. So, for example, I run a number of charities in the UK that recognise the importance of music for children with special needs and try to, by showing how children can succeed in music, I want to put pressure on local government and national government to say, pay for it. It's the most important thing in the children's lives. And in the UK, I think it's what we call a postcode lottery. So there's a very patchy provision. In some places, in London particularly, for example, music provision in special schools is generally very good. There's a lot of expertise and a lot of enthusiasm and commitment. But in other places, there might be much less. So depending where you live will affect the quality of the music education you receive. And one of the things I try to do through setting up UK-wide charities is to try to level the playing field so that every child, irrespective of whether they have money in the family or not, can have access to music, which for them is probably the single most important thing in their lives. Do it again, a bit faster, keep going. And again, write me a Beyonce blues. She made it work musically. And then she improvised a lovely blues.
Why are you doing that?
Because that's the end of the piece and the audience will be listening and watching you. And stand up, won't you? How do you do your bow? Find the end of the piano. Do a head bow. That's it, Ashley! And everyone will going, yay! Woohoo! Fantastic.